a long time ago, and that started a love of all things Southeast Asian, and the obvious thing to do with Malay was to then hop in next door and learn Indonesian.
Hi, I'm Danny and I'm currently studying Indonesian with Clark Steve. I stumbled across Indonesian as I was studying Japanese and came into UTAS looking to major in Japanese, and now I'm majoring in Indonesian and Japanese.
I might just, I'm going to ask our panellists here a few questions. So I might ask Danny, basically, does that mean you stumbled upon Indonesian? And if so, what's kept you studying it?
I guess I did stumble across Indonesian. I wanted to do Asian languages, and that was one of the ones that UTAS offered. And since then I've had the opportunity to travel over there and find applications for it, so it's been beneficial and it's kept me studying it in that I like the flow of the language in comparative to the other languages that I study. It's been one that I can pick up possibly quicker because of the lack of characters.
Okay, little plug for Indonesian there. Indonesian is a language which is not at all related to English, so you get to get insights into a culture quite different to Australian culture, but you don't have the problems of the script because the script is, I think, very consistent. Maybe Alison and Diane, you might want to talk a little bit about maybe what you were thinking about before you started learning Indonesian and then what the reality was. Did you think it was going to be difficult? Has it been difficult? Has it been easy? What's been difficult? What's been easy?
I think first year Indonesian was really easy if you were prepared to do the homework that Pat Steve set you. And I think that's a difference that might be being a mature age student. When you select to go back to uni to learn a language, you're prepared to put in some hard work. So I found first year very easy because the words were simple. You learned the word for pen and sun and happy, and was easy. It got a bit more tricky when you want to talk about things like development, employment and climate change, and then I really had to work hard. But it's definitely worth it because learning another language, you get to understand different concepts that we don't have in English. So, for example, Indonesians have a concept of merantau, which is working overseas, and we'll quite often hear about that in the news, where someone's worked, an Indonesian person or a Filipino person has worked overseas to send money home. We don't have that as a concept, so it helps you understand their culture. So that's been really interesting too.
At first I found it a little difficult. It was awesome fun. Classes were very good fun with Pat Steve. Lots of games, and that was great. But the difficulty was remembering all the words, and it was a bit like starting to exercise when you haven't exercised for a long time, learning the words and making them stick in your brain. But then I found, as I got the hang of it was fine. As long as I put a bit of time in, it was just fun. And yeah, as Alison said, it was great learning about the culture because the culture comes into the lesson. So at school I found learning a language very dry and boring, but at university it's just been fun. The classes have been very small, made lots of friends, and yeah, it's been great.
Both Alison and Diane have learned Indonesian as adults. How have you found that? Because a lot of people think that, if I'm an adult, I'm kind of past it from a foreign language learning point of view. Has that been your experience? What difficulties has that presented you? And, have they really been that difficult?
said that first year learning all the vocab and everything was easy, and I did find it harder, especially in third year. So I checked with my younger friends who were in my class, and they were having the same problems. So that was good to know. But there is one thing about older students, and that is that we're doing it out of choice, so we're really highly motivated. And I did read some research that said a younger memory and a younger person might have different skills in language learning that an older person doesn't have, but the opposite is true as well. An older person has skills. We understand more about grammar. We're prepared to put the time in. So I've definitely found learning vocab improved my memory, and I'm relying on continuing to learn Indonesian and maybe a couple of other languages to stave off dementia.
Well, like Alison, I'd heard that learning a language could stave off dementia, and that was a motivation for going back to university. Definitely learning a language has just been fun. I haven't, as I said at the start, it was a little bit difficult, but just to get you into the swing of it. But once I got in the swing of it, I really haven't found it that hard. And I think that, well, I don't know, Danny and I seem to do all right. Sometimes Danny's ahead. It depends who's studying more, really. Danny's in my class. So I think it's really the hours you put in before and after the lessons that show rather than your age. But I'll get Danny's opinion on that.
It might be worthwhile coming over to Danny again just quickly, because you, Alison and Chris had a little bit of background in Malaysia. Malay is a very closely related language to Indonesian. Diane, I think you travelled a little, hadn't you, yeah? Whereas Danny, before you turned up at the first class, did you have any background with Indonesia at all? Or?
I had a very small background with Indonesia. I travelled there as a kid without any real recognition of the language or the sort of culture. It was just the holiday you go on when you're 10 and it's fun and great and you don't really pay attention. Yes, I was starting from zero. It'd be my second language. I don't know how you go about saying that. Second foreign language, that's a better way to put it. So I found that I had already sort of conditioned myself to attaching meaning to strange words that were new to me. My biggest issue was the fact that because it was, your brain sorts your languages into your first language and your second language, and if you've got more than one second language, your brain gets really confused and starts jumbling them together. So I would have Japanese coming out in my Indonesian and Indonesian in my Japanese, and it just got very, very confusing. So that presented a whole lot of new problems, but what Diane was saying, it definitely depends the time you put in. If you have a couple of weeks where you're not looking at it and then you come back into class and try and speak Indonesian, suddenly your brain's a little bit confused and it doesn't come out quite as well as it should. But definitely the more time you put in over however long you're studying for, it's definitely going to give you the benefits.
By the way, I might just add a little bit about the research that both Alice and Diane were referring to. There is a decent amount of research now that shows that if you study foreign languages, it does have some impact on your memory. It improves your memory, and it does seem to also make it less likely that you're going to suffer from dementia, or that the onset of dementia might be later. There is also some research in Europe, by the way, that suggests that you're more attractive to the opposite sex if you study a foreign language. So there you go. Chris, I might just ask you, what have been the benefits for you of learning Indonesian? And you started with a bit of Malay and then you had to hop over to Indonesian. What was your experience of that? There may be people here who've come across a little bit of Malay travelling in Malaysia.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the benefit to me and the benefit to any Australian learning Indonesian is that direct engagement with our closest neighbours. You know, if I were a student in the States, I'd probably want to be learning Spanish understand why generations of English have learned French or German, but if I'm sitting here in Australia thinking, what language should I be learning? Open my eyes, what do I see? Indonesia. So there's that immediate engagement with our closest neighbours, and if you speak Indonesian, or for me the dominant language is still Malay, you immediately have half of Southeast Asia opened up to you. Then you start to find that you're using that language in the strangest of places. Last year I was in Portugal and the centre of Lisbon was abuzz with Indonesian. The president was making his final overseas visit to Portugal, and all of a sudden people were speaking Indonesian everywhere, and apart from English it was the language I used the most in Portugal. So those sort of strange things happen all the time, and it's something that language learners find, that they think they're opening one door to one culture, to one language, and it opens a whole corridor of doors. That's one of the most important things that I think we find as language speakers. Yeah.
And I might say as well, I might drop a few Indonesia facts. People might not realise just how big Indonesia is. Has any guesses to population? There's some people who should know here. Population of Indonesia, yeah? That's pretty close. It was 220 million a while back. It's just over 250 million now. So it's the fourth most populous country on Earth. People might not be aware of just how diverse it is as well. So Chris was talking about, you think you're opening one door and then you realise it's actually a whole corridor. Just within Indonesia itself, of course, you've got something like 500 different ethnic groups, and that means hundreds of different local languages as well. And Indonesian opens the door to learning more about those local cultures as well. So I'll just ask each of the speakers for one final plug, I guess, for anybody who might be thinking of learning Indonesian, or any foreign language for that matter. We'd like to encourage people to learn any foreign language. Just one last thing you might like to say, one last reason why it's a good idea, you think.
People who learn second languages or foreign languages are really good fun, and it's just fun, and you can eavesdrop on conversations because people don't expect you to be able to speak. So I would recommend Indonesian or learning a second language to any uni student, because sometimes the classes are huge and really you have no personal contact. But if you learn a language, you have to speak to your fellow students. You have to make friends. So that is one of the great advantages of language learning. Just good fun.
Well, I've really enjoyed learning a language. As our classes at UTAS are really small, and we also have the opportunity to do in-country study in Lombok, which is the next island over to Bali in Indonesia, and also in West Timor in Kupang, which I've taken both those opportunities, and I've made lots of Indonesian friends there, as well as Australian friends both in Tasmania and all over Australia who've been studying there. And it's really, as Chris said, opened a lot of new corridors in my life, and yeah, I never look back. And thanks, Steve, for being a great lecturer.
Oh, shucks. Alison raises an important point, which is that studying a language is challenging. It is very good for your brain, but it is also an opportunity, particularly for adult learners, to return to childhood, because you get to start talking about your favourite colour and what food you like eating. We like to play a lot of games, so it can be a real refresher compared to other things you might be doing at university or other things that might be happening in life. And thank you very much to Diane for bringing up the in-country program, because UTAS has a number of different in-country programs that you can study in Lombok, which is next door to Bali, in Kupang, which is in West Timor, but also in Central Java and West Java. There are many different possibilities at the moment, and there is a decent amount of government support for you studying in-country. Sorry, so last words please, Chris and Danny.
My final plug is to say to everyone that in Tasmanian schools we have nearly 2,000 students learning Indonesian, and we have some of the fantastic Indonesian teachers here today. It's an invaluable opportunity for our students in our schools to learn a language, and it's important that even in Tasmania, the most isolated state in Tasmania as far as distance from Indonesia is concerned, for us to continue to have groups of young Tasmanian students coming through who have had that language experience. It's important for us, those of us who love Indonesia, to continue to have conversations with our teachers, with those communities in schools, parent-teacher associations, any opportunity we can to talk about the benefits of learning a language, and for today's purposes, the benefit of learning Indonesian above all others.
Coming back to the in-country programs, almost go in thinking, okay, I'm going to sit in the university, I'm going to study, and I'm going to complete the level that I'm doing, but you can end up in the weirdest of situations that you never even thought of. I ended up on a bus with the Prince of the Regency heading out to a village that hasn't even been exposed to modern religion yet. Only the chief spoke Indonesian, so that was a bit of a test to sort of be thrown into a situation where you sort of have an idea of what's going on, but you're really having to rely on what language you have, and also a bit of sign language. But to be exposed to that sort of thing is something that you never even expected when you've sort of embarked on the journey. So definitely there's more opportunities than you expect when you're taking on a language, not just through learning the language, but through travelling, meeting lots of people, and all kinds of other experiences.
Okay, I'd like to thank our panellists, so I'd ask you to give a warm round of applause for them sharing their experiences. We're still going to be here, so if any of you have got any questions about learning Indonesian, please ask us. If there's anything that you'd like to say about your experiences learning foreign languages, please come up and talk to us.
Yes, well, good morning. My name is Dirk. I'm a presenter of Hobart FM 96.1, and I wholeheartedly agree with this gentleman here about learning another language. That's on Saturday afternoon between 3 and 4. I present the Dutch language. The aim of the Dutch language is, if you happen to go to Holland, we teach you the easy sentences. And particularly where you have to be careful of, us being Australian, we often put swear words in our language. And when somebody comes from outside the country, he or she translates everything you say in their own language. So the word bloody doesn't make any sense to them. The word F, for example, which we should not use in our language, doesn't make sense to them. So as an outsider, they confuse. The only one I would say, if you're interested in learning the Dutch language, listen to my program at 96 FM every Saturday afternoon, the Dutch language. And the only sentence I first learned in the Indonesian language is Saya cinta kamu.
There you go. Thank you. Okay, so feel free to come up and talk to us about learning Indonesian or about any Indonesia-related topic you feel like. Thank you.